I still remember the exact second it happened. Monday morning, 9:02 am. The hum of the office felt normal. The kind of gray routine you stop noticing after years of loyalty. That's when the junior HR assistant walked in, her arms stacked with envelopes like she was dealing poker cards at a funeral. She stopped at my desk, smiled without meaning it, and placed one red envelope in front of me. "Congratulations, Daniel." I looked at it, thought it was just another company formality. Some thank you note for 4 years of service. Maybe a coupon for stale champagne at the lounge party later. I didn't even bother opening it. But then I heard her say a second name. Emily Ross. The girl I once trained. The newcomer who joined 2 years ago and still asked me the difference between revenue and profit margins. The HR assistant said her name, and then the words that made my hand freeze halfway over my coffee cup. "To our new head of innovation." The second red envelope wasn't a thank you. It was a promotion. My promotion. I sat still, the blood in my veins turning to ice. Not fear, not even anger. It was precision. The same cold precision a surgeon feels right before cutting into flesh. Just 3 hours earlier, I had been in Richard Hale's office, my boss, my so-called mentor, going over a strategy deck I'd worked on for months. 42 slides of projections, models, and growth scenarios, each one color-coded to perfection. Richard had nodded through the entire thing like a bobblehead doll with a stiff neck. "Excellent work, Daniel," he said, patting the desk. "Be ready for champagne tonight." So yes, I was ready. Ready for recognition. Ready for the reward I had earned. What I wasn't ready for was Emily stepping onto a makeshift stage in the lounge. Richard's hand on her shoulder, like a proud father presenting his daughter to the world. She gave her little speech. Fake humility, twitching smile, too many blinks. People clapped. Some clapped harder than others. People owed me favors. People I had trained. People who knew damn well I carried this department on my back. And then Richard said it, the line that cut deeper than any knife. "She simply contributes more than Daniel." Like he was handing her a coffee mug. Not my title. Not my years of skipped weekends, cancelled holidays, late nights building slide decks while my mother fought cancer in a hospital bed. I raised my glass anyway. I toasted them. I smiled wider than I ever had. Because none of them, not Richard, not Emily, not the interns or the half-drunk CFO, none of them knew what I had slipped into the upcoming executive agenda. A single file buried inside the Monday board packet. A file I had named Blueprint. Inside it was everything they didn't want anyone to see. A confidential trail of contracts signed too early. Meetings logged where no meetings should have existed. Receipts, recordings, shadows. It wasn't just evidence. It was Judgment Day in a folder. And while they drank champagne that Friday night, I wasn't celebrating. I was waiting. Because on Monday, 8:01 am sharp, I would walk into the boardroom not as a strategist, but as an executioner. Long before the red envelope ever touched my desk, I had felt it. The shift. The subtle slide of power away from me and into Emily's hands. It started small. Richard began quoting her in meetings. Not her ideas, mine. Word for word. I'd recognized the phrasing instantly. I'd written those exact lines just 2 days earlier in my one-on-one reports to him. And yet, in front of the team, he'd say, "Emily raised an interesting point the other day." Then he'd repeat my work as if it had fallen straight from her lips. People laughed. People nodded. And Emily? She never corrected him. She just sat there, that little smirk curling at the edges of her mouth, like she knew she had tapped into a secret current of influence. At first, I tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe Richard was just mixing us up. But then I noticed something else. Cancellations. Richard suddenly began missing key reviews, budget check-ins, pipeline strategy calls. Even the quarterly updates he never skipped. The excuses were always the same. Family emergency. Yet the system logs told a different story. While I sat with my laptop open and my slides untouched, Richard was booking creative syncs on his private Outlook calendar. And the invitee was always the same. Emily Ross. The first one appeared just 48 hours after her third day at the company. The second one, scheduled during the exact hour our budget review was mysteriously cancelled. 3 hours, a locked door, and an emergency no one else could verify. But the moment that truly froze me came one afternoon in the executive lounge. I walked in, tired, holding a stale bagel. Emily stood at the counter, microwaving soup. Nothing unusual, except for one detail. The mug. It wasn't just any mug. It was Richard's his monogrammed executive mug, the one he kept locked in his desk drawer. He never let anyone touch it. Yet there it was, spinning inside the microwave. Emily stirring it casually like it belonged to her. I asked, "Did you borrow that from Richard's desk?" She didn't even look up. "Oh, he gave it to me." She said it like Richard had handed her his soul. That's when my suspicion hardened into certainty. Emily wasn't just ambitious. She was embedded. And Richard, my boss, my supposed mentor, wasn't just favoring her. He was building her. But I wasn't going to march into HR with jealous accusations and calendar screenshots. That would make me look desperate. No. If they wanted to play chess, I'd play the long game. I'd gather evidence, not rumors, patterns, not guesses, receipts, not emotions. I began quietly, checking meeting invites, timestamps, email chains. I created a digital folder on my personal drive, one no one else could access. A folder I named Blueprint. Inside it, I started placing seeds, screenshots of Slack conversations, server access logs showing Emily in restricted directories, timestamps of Richard's emergencies, matched against Emily's Outlook invites. Piece by piece, the picture sharpened. Not favoritism, not mentoring, a conspiracy. And I promised myself one thing. I wouldn't expose it until I had the whole truth. Not just the surface rot, but the roots. Because if I was going to take them down, I wasn't just going to clip their wings. I was going to burn the nest. The first real crack in their armor came late on a Thursday night. Most of the office had cleared out, leaving only the hum of vending machines and the faint whine of the air conditioning. I stayed back, not because I had work, but because I'd started a new habit. Lurking. I wasn't watching people anymore. I was watching patterns. And patterns are louder when everyone else is silent. That night, while digging through the shared company server, I found something that shouldn't have been there. A folder buried inside a generic directory labeled Internal Q3 Reports. But this one wasn't like the others. It didn't have a name. It had a dot. Just a single period, sitting in the middle of an ocean of spreadsheets. Curiosity overruled caution. I clicked. Inside were 3 files, all password protected, all modified at odd hours of the night. The metadata didn't say admin or system. It said, Eras's Emily. Now, most employees don't even know how to hide a folder with a dot. But Emily did, which meant she wasn't just learning strategy from Richard. She was learning something darker. For 2 nights, I tried every password trick I could think of: company slogans, birth dates, even Richard's golf tournament numbers. Nothing worked. But on the 3rd night, something gave. I don't know if it was a glitch, or fate, or just the cruel humor of corporate systems. But when I typed Innovation 2023, the most obvious password, Emily could have chosen, the files unlocked. And what I saw inside shifted my suspicion into rage. The first file was a draft proposal. Not just any proposal, my proposal. The exact deck I had built over 6 months. Stripped of my name, retitled with hers, and marked confidential for board review. The second file was worse. It was a spreadsheet of anticipated budget cuts. Whole departments slashed. Entire teams downsized. Names I recognized. People I had coffee with every morning. Listed like cattle for slaughter. At the bottom of the spreadsheet was a note, pending Richard's approval. But the third file was the one that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a document. It was an audio recording. Richard's voice. Low, measured. The voice he used when he wanted to sound fatherly. She'll never see it coming. Daniel's too predictable. We'll let him build the foundation. And when the time's right, you'll take the credit. That's how this works. Then came Emily's laugh. Sharp, confident, almost intimate. That single laugh told me everything I needed to know. They weren't colleagues. They weren't even co-conspirators. They were partners. I closed the file, leaned back in my chair, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Because now, I had proof. Proof strong enough to ruin them both. But proof is only power if you know when to use it. Too early, and it looks like jealousy. Too late, and the enemy fortifies. So I didn't rush. I copied the files, moved them into my hidden folder, my own blueprint. And then I waited, because revenge isn't served hot. It's served when your enemy thinks they're untouchable. And Emily? She was just starting to believe she was invincible. 2 days after I discovered the secret folder, an email landed in my inbox. Subject line: Dinner Friday p.m. The sender? Richard Hale. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Richard didn't invite mid-level strategists like me to dinner. His table was reserved for board members, investors, or the kind of consultants who charged by the second. But there it was. Plain. Direct. Almost casual. Daniel, join me and Emily for dinner Friday. Important discussion about the department's future. I stared at the email longer than I should have. Not because I didn't know what it meant, but because I knew exactly what it meant. They knew, or at least they suspected. This wasn't a dinner. It was a test. A chance to measure me, to gauge whether I was loyal enough to be ignored, or dangerous enough to be eliminated. Still, I accepted, because in games like this, refusing an invitation is louder than showing up. Friday night. The restaurant was one of those sleek downtown places where the wine list is longer than the menu, and every table feels like a stage. I walked in, and there they were. Richard in his tailored navy suit. Emily in a dress that screamed promotion party more than team dinner. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes stayed sharp, calculating, like a chess player studying the board. Daniel, Richard boomed, standing to shake my hand. So glad you came. The moment I sat, the waiter poured wine into 3 glasses. Richard lifted his first. To new beginnings, he said. Emily clinked her glass against his, then against mine. I raised mine, but didn't drink, because I noticed something. Richard and Emily's glasses were filled higher than mine. Subtle, almost invisible. But in a room like this, nothing is accidental. I took a careful sip anyway. Bitter, expensive, safe for now. The first 20 minutes were small talk. Richard asked about my family. Emily pretended to care about my mother's health. I answered politely, smiling in all the right places, even laughing when Richard cracked a weak joke about consultants being parasites. But I knew what was happening. They weren't listening to my answers. They were studying my tone, my posture, my hesitation. Then Richard leaned forward. His smile thinned. Daniel, you've been with this company a long time. You've built a lot of foundations. The word foundation struck me like a coded signal. Had he seen the blueprint file? Did he know? I matched his gaze steady. I believe strong foundations are everything. Emily's lips curled into a small smirk, like she was testing me with her silence. Richard swirled his wine. Tell me, Daniel, do you ever feel overlooked? The trap was set. If I said yes, I'd look bitter. If I said no, I'd look fake. So I played the third option. I smiled. Slow. Calm. Overlooked people don't get dinner invitations with their boss and the head of innovation. Richard studied me. Emily tilted her head, and for a flicker of a second, I saw it in their eyes. Uncertainty. They weren't sure what I knew. They weren't sure how dangerous I was. Which meant, for the first time, I had control. Dinner ended with polite words and a promise to catch up soon. But as I walked back to my car, one thought pulsed in my mind. They weren't just planning to steal my work. They were planning to test how far they could push me before breaking me. What they didn't know was that the blueprint was growing every day. And by the time I was finished, it wouldn't just expose them. It would bury them. The Monday after that dinner, I didn't walk into the office like a man who had been overlooked. I walked in like a man who had a secret. Emily was already there, perched at Richard's assistant's desk, flipping through a stack of papers that weren't hers to touch. She smiled when she saw me, polite, but sharp enough to cut glass. "Morning, Daniel," she said, in that sing-song voice she used when she wanted to remind me she had the upper hand. I nodded, calm, collected, because I wasn't here to trade words. I was here to set a trap. For weeks, I had been quietly observing Emily's habits. She had one weakness: curiosity. Emily couldn't resist peeking into folders that weren't hers, reading memos not addressed to her, skimming emails left open on someone else's screen. She thought it made her smarter. She thought it gave her leverage. What she didn't realize was that curiosity could be weaponized. So that morning, I created a new document, a single-page memo titled, Confidential Hale's Private Notes. Inside it, I wrote just 2 lines. Project Phoenix timeline acceleration required. Board approval contingent on Ross's compliance. It was meaningless, fabricated, but it looked like the kind of explosive, high-level information she couldn't resist. I placed the file into a shared drive folder I knew she checked, hidden just enough that she'd think she had discovered it. And then I waited. By noon, the bait was taken. The system logs showed exactly what I expected. User, Eros's, file accessed, confidential Hale's private notes. And she hadn't just opened it, she had downloaded it, which meant the document now lived on her personal device. Which meant, the moment she tried to use it against me, I'd know. That afternoon, I saw her corner Richard in the hallway, whispering, her eyes wide like she had uncovered state secrets. Richard's jaw tightened. His glance flicked toward me once, just once, before he masked it with a fake smile. Perfect. Now the suspicion wasn't on me. It was on her. Because Richard, the man who prided himself on control, had just been told his private notes were out in the wild and Emily was the one holding them. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know how it ended. Emily would insist she found it by accident. Richard would pretend to believe her, but in his head, a crack of doubt had already formed. And once doubt creeps in, trust is gone. That night, I updated the blueprint folder, added screenshots of the server logs showing her access, added timestamps of her download, added one more piece of the puzzle that would eventually paint her as not just ambitious, but reckless. For the first time, I felt the game shifting. They had cornered me once. Now it was my turn to push them into a corner, and I knew something Emily didn't. The closer she got to Richard, the faster he would destroy her the moment she looked like a liability. All I had to do was make her look like one. The boardroom had always felt like a church to me. Polished oak table like an altar, leather chairs like pews, and the board members, priests who never smiled unless they were about to sacrifice someone. I'd sat in that room dozens of times, but never with a real voice. Always the note-taker, always the dependable worker. Not anymore. It started with a message, a single email to Linda Cartwright, head of legal and the one person in the building Richard couldn't charm or bully. Subject, compliance concern for legal review only. Body, evidence of premature promotion authorization and irregular project approvals. Documents attached. Attached was a carefully curated packet from my blueprint folder, just enough to raise suspicion, not enough to point back at me. Contracts with signatures dated weeks before postings. Meeting invites to creative sessions that never appeared on the company calendar. An expense report with a spa charge labeled client wellness, but with no client listed. It was bait. And Linda, the type who sharpened knives for breakfast, would bite. But I wasn't done. I needed the board to see everything at once, not drip-fed, not twisted through gossip. So I built something stronger, a digital file hidden inside the upcoming quarterly review packet. When the directors opened their secure board portal on Monday, they wouldn't just see charts and revenue forecasts. They'd see a folder labeled April Shadows Confidential. Inside, every piece of evidence, contracts, logs, recordings, all time-stamped, all damning. And the best part? The metadata pointed not to me, but to Emily's downloads and Richard's approvals. Still, I knew the board wouldn't move just on paper. They needed sound. They needed to hear the rot. That's where the audio file came in. Martin's voice on the original, raw recording had been too obvious, too scandalous. So I cleaned it, trimmed it, and left just enough for plausible deniability. Richard, relax. You'll get the title. Just keep doing what you're doing. Emily, should I leave the blazer on this time? No names. No context. But in the boardroom, context didn't matter. The implication would be enough. Friday evening, I stood in my apartment, the city lights glowing through the window like 1,000 silent witnesses. The blueprint folder was ready. The trap was set. I poured a glass of bourbon, neat, strong, deliberate, and stared at the glowing screen one last time. This wasn't about promotion anymore. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. This was about burning the infection out before it swallowed the whole company. By Monday, the board wouldn't just question Richard's leadership. They'd question whether Emily was ever more than his convenient distraction. And me? I'd walk into that boardroom not as a dependable mule, but as the executioner holding the axe. Monday, 8 o'clock a.m. sharp. The boardroom was colder than usual, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones when something is about to break. 7 directors sat lined up along the polished oak table, their faces carved in stone, their pens poised like weapons. Linda Cartwright, head of legal, was at the far end, a thick folder in front of her. The tab read, "Confidential April Shadows." "My folder." Richard strolled in 3 minutes late, fixing his tie, that smug grin plastered across his face. Emily followed, her smile rehearsed, her heels still loud against the marble. I was already seated. Navy suit, fresh shave, zero smile. No one spoke until Linda did. Her voice was calm, surgical. "Let's begin. Agenda item 3. April Shadows." Richard shifted in his chair. Emily glanced at him, then at me. The room went silent. Linda flipped the folder open, and the guillotine began its slow drop. "First exhibit," she said, sliding papers across the table. "Promotion contracts signed weeks before job postings. Richard Hale's signature on each. Emily Ross listed as recipient." A murmur swept the room. "Second exhibit. Irregular meeting logs. Private strategy sessions scheduled during cancelled company reviews. All approved by Richard Hale." Richard's smirk twitched. He leaned forward. "This is absurd. Misfiled paperwork at best." Linda cut him off. "Third exhibit. Expense report." She slid a receipt into the light. $2,197. A private spa in Midtown. Description: client wellness. No client listed. Date matches the night before a missed deadline. Emily's face tightened. She tried to hold her composure, but her pupils gave her away. Then came the audio file. Linda pressed play. Richard's voice, low and calm. "Relax. You'll get the title. Just keep doing what you're doing." Emily's breathy laugh. "Should I leave the blazer on this time?" The sound hit the table like a thunderclap. One director whispered, "Jesus Christ." Another pushed his chair back, disgust written across his face. Richard slammed a hand on the table. "This is taken out of context." Linda didn't flinch. "Context doesn't matter when it undermines the integrity of this company." And then the forged memo. The one Emily had printed from her inbox weeks earlier. Linda held it up like a smoking gun. "Succession plan draft. CFO replacement. Emily Ross listed as successor. Recommended by Richard Hale. Document circulated, without legal or financial oversight. Printed on company equipment. Found in the 10th floor communal printer." The room turned on Emily. She panicked. "I didn't write that. Daniel sent it to me." Linda's gaze sliced through her. "And you printed it. You distributed it. That makes you complicit." Emily's lips trembled. She looked at me desperate, like I might save her. I leaned back, folded my hands, and said nothing. Finally, the question came. Charles Whitmore, the oldest board member, the one who never spoke unless he was about to end a career, pointed a knobby finger across the table. "To summarize, Richard Hale pre-authorized promotions before postings. He granted unauthorized access to budgetary reports. And you," he jabbed at Emily, "circulated a forged succession plan that could destabilize the company. Tell me why you shouldn't both be removed immediately." Richard's face turned crimson. He sputtered excuses, words tripping over each other like drunks in an alley. Emily tried to plead, her voice cracking, her performance finally shattering. But the board wasn't listening. They'd heard enough. Then Linda turned to me. "Daniel, do you have anything to add?" I could have unloaded everything. Every screenshot, every late-night log, every blurred security still. Enough to drown them both. But I didn't. I leaned forward, calm, deliberate. "Only this. Richard once told me Emily contributes more than I do." I figured it was time I contributed something back. Silence. Then a sharp, collective intake of breath. The line landed like a hammer to glass. Emily froze. Richard sank lower in his chair. And for the first time, the board looked at me not as the dependable mule, but as the man who had just turned the entire room upside down. By noon, it was over. Richard's nameplate had been ripped off his office door. A cardboard box sat on his desk with his coffee mug, a framed photo of a yacht he never owned, and 3 unread leadership books no one believed he had read. Emily wasn't fired, not yet. The board wanted to review intent versus awareness, but she was escorted out quietly, shame hanging off her shoulders like a soaked coat. Her desk sealed with an IT sticker. Access revoked. I didn't go back to my desk either. I went straight to the 16th floor. Oak trim, glass walls, the kind of offices where people didn't reheat fish in the microwave. The chairman was waiting for me. "You engineered this," he said. "Not a question, a fact." I didn't deny it. I followed the paper trail. It led where it led. He studied me like a man deciding whether to crown me king or send me to the guillotine. "You baited them." I revealed them. "And you were willing to crater your own department. Better a crater than a cancer." He paused, then gave the smallest nod. "We'd like to keep you. Effective immediately. You'll report directly to me. Interim VP of Strategy. Official promotion pending board vote." He slid a folder across the desk. "Contract, salary tripled. Seat at the table." I didn't sign. "Not yet." "Before I accept," I said, "understand this. I don't do political theater. I don't toast frauds with champagne. If I see another Emily get fast-tracked because of someone's zipper instead of their work ethic." He leaned forward. "You'll quit?" I shook my head. "I'll burn it down again. For the first time." He smiled. "You might fit in after all." I left that office not just promoted, not just reborn. I was the man who had pulled the trigger and walked away clean. Or so I thought. Because when I passed Emily's empty desk on my way back, I noticed something strange. A plain white envelope. Untouched. No name. Inside, a single flash drive. Written across it in shaky Sharpie. "Martin Insurance." I shouldn't have taken it. But curiosity has sharp teeth, and mine had already drawn blood. So that night, in a private booth on the 14th floor, away from cameras, away from whispers, I plugged it into a burner laptop. The screen blinked. One folder appeared. For emergency use only. Inside, 6 files. Each worse than the last. The first, a grainy night vision video. Martin's office. Sophie, no, Emily. Her hair down, his shirt half off. Both looking directly at the camera, smiling like they knew it was recording. Insurance. Against each other. The second, an email thread. Offshore accounts. Payments disguised as consulting fees. The third, a buried HR complaint from 2 years ago. Retaliation. Silenced. The fourth, Emily's first job application. Dated months before the role was ever posted. A line highlighted. "Richard suggested I keep this quiet for now." The fifth, a spreadsheet of promotions. A pattern so obvious it felt criminal. Every young female hire accelerated. Every older male delayed. And the sixth, a simple note in plain text. "If you're reading this, it means I lost. But they won't bury me alone. Use this or destroy it. Pretend you never knew. M." I closed the laptop. My mouth tasted like metal. This wasn't just corporate betrayal. This was rot that had roots deeper than I'd imagined. And the worst part, someone else already knew. Because when I opened my office the next morning, my chair was still warm. The drawer where I'd hidden the flash drive, empty. The war wasn't over. It had only just gone nuclear. Tuesday, 6:14 a.m. The first sign something was wrong. My office door was ajar. The second, my chair was still warm. The third, the flash drive was gone. I had locked it in a drawer with two-factor access and a false bottom. Only 4 people had clearance to my floor before AM. I pulled up the badge logs. Martin's ID, deactivated. Emily's revoked. Janitorial, scanned out at 4:03 am. The 4th ID blinked back at me. J. Hernandez legal. I froze. Hernandez. The initials on that offshore email thread in the insurance files had been GH Lux. The hidden partner. The quiet hand. And they were still inside the company. By 8 o'clock am, I was already moving. I had ID freeze the badge logs. Surveillance footage? Corrupted, of course. Too convenient to be a glitch. Someone wasn't just covering tracks, they were erasing me from the equation. I knew I had hours, maybe less, before the narrative flipped. If Hernandez had the flash drive, they had everything. Martin's blackmail videos, Emily's fast-tracked contracts, the offshore accounts, the HR complaint, and worse, they'd know that I had seen it. So I built my own bomb. Not for R, not for legal. They were compromised. For the press. And for 3 board members, I trusted old guard types with names carved into glass towers. People who hated the stink of scandal more than they loved money. I compiled a dossier, screenshots, audio clips, patterns of promotion. Enough evidence to not just damage Richard and Emily, but to burn the entire rotten network. At 7:03 a.m., I sent it. Secure channels, encrypted, timed release. At 10:17 a.m., chaos bloomed. The PR director resigned mid-call. 2 department heads walked out before lunch. And at 1:07 p.m., Emily's termination notice went live in real time on an all-staff Zoom. She barely got out half a scream of defam before her access vanished, her face freezing into pixels. By 2:00 p.m., Richard was seen outside headquarters in a Blacktown car, speaking to a man in a gray suit, a man who didn't blink once during their entire exchange. When Richard spotted me across the plaza, he tried to smile, but it wasn't victory in his eyes. It was fear. Because Richard knew what I knew now. The real enemy wasn't me, wasn't him, wasn't Emily. It was the ghost in the system, Jay Hernandez. By Friday, the company was in freefall. Richard retired for personal reasons. Emily vanished from LinkedIn, like she never existed. Hernandez's email bounced no longer with legal, but I didn't believe that for a second. Ghosts don't vanish. They move. And as I sat on the 27th floor, no title on my door, no nameplate, just an unlisted extension and the board's direct ear, I realized something terrifying. Every strategy now ran through me. Every decision passed my desk. I was holding the blueprint, but someone else still held the matches. And sooner or later, Hernandez would want their fire back. Monday, 2 weeks later, the office was unrecognizable. New faces in conference rooms, old names scrubbed from door plates. And me, Daniel Ross, interim VP of strategy, the man who had burned 2 careers to ash and lived to tell it. The board praised me in hushed tones. Reporters called me a quiet reformer. HR used my name in leadership training slides. I told myself I'd won, but victories in this building never came without smoke. At 7:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. No caller ID. I answered, a voice I'd never heard before, smooth as polished glass. Mr. Ross, I trust you're enjoying your view from the 27th floor. I froze. Hernandez? A soft chuckle. Names don't matter. Roles do. And yours has changed, whether you realize it or not. Before I could reply, an email hit my inbox. No sender. No subject. I opened it. Inside, a single photo. Me, at my desk, taken less than 3 minutes ago. The camera angle was impossible high downward, like from the ceiling. But when I glanced up, there was nothing. Just white panels and fluorescent lights. The voice continued. You think you exposed corruption. You think you burned Richard and Emily. But you only cleared the board for us. I gripped the phone tighter. For us? Yes, the voice said calmly. The system needed a cleaner. Someone expendable enough to gut the rot, but ambitious enough to think they were in control. That's you. Congratulations. You're not a player, Mr. Ross. A pause. You're the pawn that reached the other side of the board. And now you're ours. My laptop screen blinked black, then came alive with a new file directory. Initiative H. Dozens of folders. Thousands of files. Government contracts. Dark money flows. Political influence memos. This wasn't corporate rot. This was empire building. The voice whispered in my ear. You can walk away. Pretend you never saw this. Or, you can step fully into the role we designed for you. You've proven yourself useful. Now it's time to be powerful. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at the abyss on my screen. Every choice I thought was mine. Every move I thought I made on instinct had been calculated, fed, directed. Richard and Emily weren't victims of chance. They were test cases, sacrifices. And me? I wasn't the avenger. I was the experiment. The line clicked dead. The screen blinked once more, and a countdown began. 10 o'clock. 9:59. 9:58. The files were set to vanish unless I acted, unless I claimed them. So I did the only thing I could. I moved the cursor to the folder, and I clicked download. That night, I didn't go home. I sat in the dark, the glow of the laptop painting my face, as terabytes of secrets poured into my drive. When it finished, I shut the lid, leaned back, and whispered to no one. They think I'm their pawn. They're wrong. I'm the next player.